The night felt colder than any I'd ever experienced, though the campfire crackled warmly, casting flickering shadows across our faces. We were 5 in all, huddled around the fire, laughing off the strange legends about this forest tales of eerie whispers and haunted screams. Caleb, the boldest among us, leaned forward, his grin sly. "You all know there's no such thing as ghosts, right?" he teased, breaking the tension we all pretended not to feel. But beneath the laughter, we each had a creeping sense that something was off, something lurking just beyond the reach of the firelight. The wind stirred, rustling the leaves overhead, and I felt a chill ripple down my spine. Emily shivered beside me, pulling her jacket tighter. "It's just the wind," she muttered, as if convincing herself. I could hear the faintest whisper carried by that wind, a strange, almost lyrical tone that seemed to beckon us deeper into the woods. I glanced around, half expecting to see someone, or something, watching from the shadows. I told myself it was only nerves, a trick of the imagination, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. As the hours slipped by, our laughter grew strained, conversations shorter. The forest had a way of swallowing sound, leaving an oppressive silence whenever we paused. I found myself staring into the darkness, straining to see beyond the trees. Caleb started up again with another ghost story. But I was only half listening, my thoughts drifting to the legends of the forest's silent scream. According to the locals, if you heard the scream, it meant the spirits had taken notice of you, and they weren't likely to let you go. The fire crackled loudly, and for a moment, everything else fell silent. Then, just as Caleb finished his story, a piercing scream shattered the quiet night. It wasn't any of us. It came from somewhere deep in the woods. We sat frozen, every nerve alert, hearts pounding in unison. I glanced at the others, but no one dared speak. In that one horrific moment, it felt as though the entire forest was holding its breath, waiting for us to make the next move. I struggled to shake off the terror clawing at my chest. "It was probably just an animal," I whispered, though I barely believed it myself. Caleb tried to laugh, but the sound fell flat. "An animal that screams like a person?" he muttered, half to himself. No one replied. The truth was, we all knew there were no animals in this part of the forest that could make a sound like that. We were left with the chilling certainty that something unnatural had disturbed the night. After what felt like an eternity, Emily spoke up. "Maybe we should leave. Pack up and go back to town." Her voice was barely above a whisper, as if speaking any louder might draw the scream closer. We looked at each other, gauging who would be the first to give in to the suggestion. It was foolish, we knew, to consider hiking back in the dark. But the forest felt increasingly oppressive, closing in on us, as if the trees themselves wanted us gone. Just as we began to discuss our options, we heard it. A soft whisper, almost too quiet to catch, drifting through the trees. It was faint, but unmistakable, as though someone were murmuring just out of reach. The words were unintelligible, yet the tone was filled with malice. I turned to Caleb, and he nodded, his face pale. "We should go," he said, his voice filled with a conviction that left no room for argument. We scrambled to gather our belongings, extinguishing the fire as quickly as we could. The darkness pressed in immediately, deeper and more absolute than before. We clicked on our flashlights, but the beams barely seemed to cut through the night. Every shadow felt alive, shifting with a sinister purpose, I could feel a prickling on the back of my neck, as if something unseen hovered just behind us, waiting to strike the moment we let our guard down. As we began to move, the whispers grew louder, circling us like a pack of wolves. Emily was trembling, her face pale and drawn. "They're everywhere," she gasped, looking around wildly. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her it was only the wind playing tricks. But I could feel the presence too, a malevolent energy stalking us through the trees. It was as if the forest itself had woken up, filled with ancient, restless spirits who resented our intrusion. The trail was barely visible in the dim light, our flashlight struggling to pierce the suffocating darkness. I tried to keep my breathing steady, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other, but the whispers were relentless, filling my mind with twisted, half-formed thoughts. I felt a surge of panic rising within me, and I fought to keep it at bay, knowing that once fear took hold, it would be impossible to shake. Suddenly, Caleb stopped short, his flashlight trained on the ground. I stepped up beside him, following his gaze. There, in the soft earth, was a set of footprints, impossibly large and deeply imprinted, leading away from the path and into the shadows. We stared, each of us gripped by the same horrific thought. These weren't ours. Someone, or something, was walking parallel to us, lurking just out of sight. A sudden rustling nearby made us all jump, and Caleb shone his light toward the sound. The beam illuminated a shape, moving between the trees, something tall and slender, with limbs that seemed to twist unnaturally as it walked. I felt my stomach lurch, bile rising in my throat as the thing turned its head toward us. Its ice-black pits, filled with an unholy hunger, locked onto mine, freezing me in place. We broke into a run, our footsteps pounding against the forest floor. The whispers had turned into a cacophony now, filling our ears with insidious, mocking laughter. I could feel them closing in, the spirits reaching out with cold, intangible fingers, brushing against my skin as I stumbled forward. Emily screamed, her voice echoing through the trees, and I glanced back just in time to see her vanish, pulled into the darkness by unseen hands. "Emily!" I shouted, but my voice was swallowed by the endless whispers. I hesitated, torn between going back for her and pushing forward. The others were ahead, their faces pale with terror as they looked back at me. Caleb grabbed my arm, his grip firm. "She's gone," he whispered, his voice choked with guilt. "If we go back, we'll be next." He was right, and deep down I knew it. But the thought of leaving her behind was almost unbearable. We pushed on, my heart heavy with guilt and fear. The whispers had quieted slightly, but the forest was far from silent. Now, it felt as though the trees themselves were watching, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, desperate to pull us into their grasp. Every step was a battle, the air thick with an oppressive weight that made it hard to breathe. I knew we were being hunted, our every movement tracked by whatever malevolent force dwelled here. As we struggled onward, the path became narrower, winding deeper into the forest. My flashlight flickered, casting erratic shadows that danced across the ground, distorting everything they touched. I felt a growing sense of hopelessness, the realization that we might never make it out alive. We were intruders in this ancient, haunted place, and it was clear that we were not welcome. Another scream rang out, this one filled with an agony so profound, it felt as though it would shatter the trees themselves. I recognized the voice. It was Caleb. I spun around, but he was gone. The The space where he had been now empty. Only the fading echo of his scream remained, haunting me as I stood paralyzed, my mind numb with fear. I was alone now, the last one left. The whispers returned, louder than ever, their voices filled with a cold, sadistic glee. I felt them circling me, pressing in closer, as if savoring my fear. I stumbled forward, driven by a desperate instinct to survive, but the forest seemed to stretch on endlessly, a labyrinth with no escape. I could feel the spirits closing in, their presence a dark shadow over my soul. My flashlight died, plunging me into complete darkness. I was left with only the sound of my own ragged breathing, and the endless whispers that filled the night. I could sense them all around me, their eyes watching, their voices seeping into my mind, filling it with visions of terror. I staggered forward, barely able to see, but driven by the faint hope that if I kept moving, I might find a way out. As I walked, I saw flickers of movement at the edges of my vision, ghostly figures that seemed to melt into the shadows, their faces twisted with malice. I could hear them calling my name, their voices a mockery of my own, distorted and hollow. I knew they were toying with me, playing a cruel game that only they understood. I was their prey, caught in a trap from which there was no escape. Finally, I saw a faint light ahead, a glimmer of hope in the endless darkness. I stumbled toward it, my heart pounding with a desperate, fragile hope. But as I drew closer, I realized the light was coming from a figure standing in the middle of the path, its face hidden in shadow. I stopped, my blood running cold as the figure began to move toward me, its footsteps slow and deliberate, each step echoing through the silence. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I turned to run, but the path had vanished, replaced by a wall of trees that seemed to close in around me, blocking any escape. The figure moved closer, its face slowly emerging from the shadows. I saw myself reflected in its eyes, a twisted, haunted version of me, filled with an unfathomable darkness. I knew then that I had been marked, claimed by the forest's curse. In a final desperate act, I bolted, tearing through the trees, not caring where I was going, only wanting to escape the nightmare that had consumed me. The whispers followed, louder and more insistent, urging me to give in, to let go. I could feel their cold hands reaching for me, pulling me back, but I fought with every ounce of strength I had, determined to survive, no matter the cost. I burst through the trees, stumbling onto a dirt road bathed in the pale light of the moon. For a moment, I thought I was safe, that I had escaped the forest's grasp. But as I stood there, gasping for breath, I heard it. A final blood-curdling scream that echoed through the night, a reminder that I would never truly be free. The forest had taken its toll, leaving me broken, haunted by the knowledge that the silent scream would follow me forever. I stood on that lonely road, the wind chilling me to the bone, and I realized the truth. The forest was alive, filled with restless spirits that would never allow intruders to escape unscathed. I had survived, but the price was steep. I could still feel the whispers lingering in my mind, a dark presence that would haunt me for the rest of my days. I knew then that the silent scream was more than a legend. It was a curse, and I had become its latest victim. The sky began to lighten as dawn approached, casting a pale glow over the road. I forced myself to walk, my legs heavy with exhaustion, my mind numb with shock. I could still feel the forest's presence behind me, a dark weight pressing on my soul. I knew I could never return to my old life, that the horrors I had witnessed would stay with me, a constant reminder of the night I had come face to face with the unknown. As I walked, I heard the whispers once more, faint and distant, but unmistakable. They were calling me back, their voices filled with a twisted, mocking laughter. I knew I would never be free, that the forest would haunt me for the rest of my life. I had survived the night, but I was no longer the person I had been. I was changed, marked by the darkness that dwelled in the heart of the forest. I found my way back to town, but I couldn't escape the feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes following my every move. People looked at me strangely, as if they could sense the darkness that clung to me. I kept my story to myself, knowing that no one would believe me, that they would dismiss my experience as a figment of my imagination. But I knew the truth, and I could never forget the horrors I had endured. In the weeks that followed, I tried to rebuild my life, to put the nightmare behind me. But the whispers haunted my dreams, filling my nights with visions of twisted shadows and dark, ancient spirits. I could still hear the silent scream echoing in my mind, a constant reminder of the night I had been marked by the forest. I knew that no matter how far I ran, the darkness would always find me. I avoided the woods, staying far away from the place where my life had been forever changed. But I could feel its pull, a dark, insidious force that beckoned me back. I knew that one day I would have to return, to face the darkness that had claimed my friends and left me broken. The forest was calling me, and I knew that I could never truly escape its grasp. I could feel myself growing colder, the warmth of life slowly slipping away as the darkness took hold. I knew that I was no longer the person I had been, that the silent scream had left its mark on my soul. I was a prisoner of the forest, bound by the curse that had claimed my friends. I could still hear their voices, faint and distant, calling out to me from the shadows. I tried to move on, to forget the horrors I had witnessed, but the memories clung to me like a shroud. I could still see their faces, twisted with fear and agony, lost to the darkness that had claimed them. I knew that I was the last one left, the only survivor of the night the silent scream had taken its toll. But I was not truly free. I was haunted, trapped by the memories of that fateful night. The whispers grew louder, filling my mind with twisted visions of darkness and despair. I could feel the forest calling me, its dark presence a constant reminder of the curse that had claimed my soul. I knew that I would never be free, that the silent scream would haunt me for the rest of my life. I was a prisoner of the darkness, bound by the curse that had claimed my friends and left me broken. I could feel myself growing colder, the warmth of life slowly slipping away as the darkness took hold. I knew that I was no longer the person I had been, that the silent scream had left its mark on my soul. I was a prisoner of the forest, bound by the curse that had claimed my friends. I could still hear their voices, faint and distant, calling out to me from the shadows. I tried to move on, to forget the horrors I had witnessed, but the memories clung to me like a shroud. I could still see their faces, twisted with fear and agony, lost to the darkness that had claimed them. I knew that I was the last one left, the only survivor of the night the silent scream had taken its toll. But I was not truly free. I was haunted, trapped by the memories of that fateful night. The whispers grew louder, filling my mind with twisted visions of darkness and despair. I could feel the forest calling me, its dark presence a constant reminder of the curse that had claimed my soul. I knew that I would never be free, that the silent scream would haunt me for the rest of my life. I was a prisoner of the darkness, bound by the curse that had claimed my friends and left me broken. I could feel myself growing colder, the warmth of life slowly slipping away as the darkness took hold. I knew that I was no longer the person I had been, that the silent scream had left its mark on my soul. I was a prisoner of the forest, bound by the curse that had claimed my friends. I could still hear their voices, faint and distant, calling out to me from the shadows. I tried to move on, to forget the horrors I had witnessed, but the memories clung to me like a shroud. I could still see their faces, twisted with fear and agony, lost to the darkness that had claimed them. I knew that I was the last one left, the only survivor of the night the silent scream had taken its toll. But I was not truly free. I was haunted, trapped by the memories of that fateful night. The whispers grew louder, filling my mind with twisted visions of darkness and despair. I could feel the forest calling me, its dark presence a constant reminder of the curse that had claimed my soul. I knew that I would never be free, that the silent scream would haunt me for the rest of my life. I was a prisoner of the darkness, bound by the curse that had claimed my friends and left me broken. I could feel myself growing colder, the warmth of life slowly slipping away as the darkness took hold. I knew that I was no longer the person I had been, that the silent scream had left its mark on my soul. I was a prisoner of the forest, bound by the curse that had claimed my friends. I could still hear their voices, faint and distant, calling out to me from the shadows.